All right, hello. Welcome back to another Classic Comics Trek Talk live stream where I cover one of the episodes of the original Star Trek series, both the series itself and the behind the scenes making of the episode. So, tonight, going to be taking a look at the Enterprise incident. One of the, I think, more popular episodes of the third season, definitely. And hail at Rogues1138. Good to see you, sir. Thank you for showing up again. Appreciate it. But yeah, so I think this is one of the more popular ones. It was one that I was looking forward to doing. Although I got to say, after watching it, and kind of thinking about it, I don't know. I still like it, but the episode definitely has issues. There's definitely some issues with it. It's one of those stories where the heroes have or some character has a very uh intricate sort of scheme they're trying to carry out, and it only works if a lot of characters just do just the right thing, at just the right time, and along the way there's any number of different ways this could get screwed up if one character just didn't do something that was needed or something like that. Okay. And as always, I'll be reading from Paul Cushman's book. These are the voyages for the behind the scenes information. This was written by DC Fontana. So her first episode of this season, and not surprising because it does feature Spock quite a bit, as most of the really good Spock episodes are written by her. And directed by John Meredith Lucas, who I believe he did. No, he didn't do the last one. I think he did. Hmm, I was thinking, yeah, yeah. So he did Alon of Troyes. So the episode before the last one. So he did a bit of a turnaround here to come back and do another one. I'm guessing they probably did it because just, it was easy to get a hold of him and they knew his schedule or something like that. All right. So this is from an NBC press release issued September 9th, 1968. Captain Kirk disguises himself as a Vulcan. Well, it says Vulcan Romulan, but it's just a Romulan, in an attempt to free the USS Enterprise, which is being held captive while Mr. Spock is a prisoner to the charms of a female Romulan commander. On Star Trek, Friday, September 27th. In the Enterprise incident, an invisible shield enables Romulan ships to surround the Enterprise without detection. Guest star Joanne Linville has the role of a beautiful Romulan commander who entices Spock to take command of the Enterprise. Dr. McCoy pronounces Captain Kirk dead after Spock applies the Vulcan death grip. The Romulan commander wants Spock's cooperation in bringing the Enterprise to her homeworld as a trophy. Spock, appearing uncharacteristically cooperative, accuses Kirk of ordering the ship into the neutral zone, prompting the captain's attack and Spock's reflexive applying of the death grip. The theme, inspired by the 1968 real life drama of the Pueblo incident, has to do with duty, loyalty, and the greater sacrifice a patriot can make for a cause, to take the fall for his country, whether the cost is his life, his freedom, or his reputation. Kirk dies in this episode, or so we are led to believe, as it had been in Amok Time and Return to Tomorrow, as McCoy did in Shore Leave, as Scotty did in The Changeling, or Chekhov did in Spectre of the Gun. Surprisingly, despite the sixth variation, it still makes for a good act break. We are told Kirk is ready to snap. He is certainly more driven than we've seen before, and Spock is cooler than normal. Not even an eyebrow is raised when his Vulcan death grip supposedly ends the captain's life. We know these characters too well to buy this. Regardless, it all works for the duration of the episode. One bump in the road during the journey has to do with a few choices made by the Romulan commander, who is so susceptible to the charms of Mr. Spock. Yes, Spock is her ticket to greater glory, and she admits this. Romulans are a passionate people, but a worthy adversary would not have so easily been tricked by him and have misjudged the entire situation. We understand that Spock has telepathic abilities and a Vulcan can plant ideas into another's mind, but it seems the commander is on the road to ruin even before she and Spock have put their fingertips together. The commander's worst lapse in judgment comes when she throws her arms around Spock while he is beaming away to the Enterprise. What does this accomplish? Her attack only results in being, or her action only results in being transported to the Enterprise and giving her enemy a valuable prisoner. The script's primary writer, Dorothy Fontana, cannot be faulted for this illogical character beat. The Romulan commander was originally a male in the early versions of the script and behaved much more sensibly in the story outlines and first draft. Fontana was asked to change the commander to female and add the flirtation with Spock. Also difficult to explain is how Spock gets whisked off of the Romulan ship in the first place. This happens during a military confrontation. Surely the shields would be up, and as long established on Star Trek, one cannot beam through the shields. Except, of course, when you can. For that matter, how does Spock beam aboard without being detected? Shouldn't a stunt like that have set off enough alarms to wake the dead? Parts of the Enterprise incident play like a melodramatic episode of Mission Impossible or like Star Trek's own Patterns of Force. Watching Kirk disguised as a Romulan centurion bamboozling his way around the enemy ship is as ludicrous as when, dressed as a German officer, he did likewise to infiltrate a Nazi headquarters. And the old look out behind you trick used here should have been left on another show. Despite these faults, many fans name this episode as one of their favorites. Perhaps that is because we got to see Kirk surgically altered as a Romulan, with the arched eyebrows and pointed ears, or because we see not one, not two, but three alien ships. Not a big deal now, but it was pretty impressive back in those days, or because the script, direction, editing, and music keep Enterprise incident moving at a brisk pace. Or perhaps because the performances are uniformly good, or because it is rare to see Spock involved in a love story. The gentle and sinuous touching of the fingers between the two participants plays like the love scene from the Thomas Crown Affair, which was in theaters at the time. If TV cannot be art, it should at least be fun, and on this count, Incident succeeds. Yeah. All right, so let's get into this episode here. All right, so we start off with, and this is an interesting for an episode because you don't normally get this. We start with a voiceover from Dr. McCoy instead of from Captain Kirk, and he notes in his logs that Captain Kirk has been showing increasing signs of emotional stress, and then we see Kirk being very short-tempered with people on the bridge. At one point, even loudly complaining that people are not really following his orders quickly enough. Then we hear McCoy again saying that he has no explanation for Kirk's behavior other than that the Enterprise has been on duty without a let up for an extended period of time, and Kirk has refused all of McCoy's requests for a more thorough examination. Then Kirk orders Sulu on a new heading, but after Sulu puts the heading in, he realizes that's going to take him straight into the neutral zone. Sulu questions this. Captain, that will take us directly into the neutral zone. And Kirk repeats the order, basically saying, yeah, I know what I said, just do it. So he obeys, and they enter into the neutral zone and go into Romulan space, which obviously this is a violation of the treaty between the Federation and the Romulans, so this is a big deal and not something that really normally should be done. Kirk asks Spock to scan the area for ships, and Spock scans and says he doesn't detect any. And no sooner does he say that than what appears right in front of him? A Klingon battlecruiser. And Spock announces that Starfleet intelligence has reported that the Romulans are now using Klingon ships. So Scotty arrives on the bridge and asks Uhura when the order to enter the neutral zone came in from Starfleet, and Uhura says, yeah, there was no order. So it seems like Kirk has just gone kind of renegade and is doing this himself. And in short order, another Klingon ship appears, and then finally a Romulan bird of prey, and immediately the Enterprise is surrounded. So the Enterprise is contacted by a Romulan centurion calling himself Subcommander Tal, and he orders that the Enterprise surrender immediately or be destroyed. Uh, or Kirk has Uhura cut the audio, and he and Spock discuss the matter, and they agree that what these people really want is they want the Enterprise. Oh yeah, yeah, gone rogue. Yeah, I didn't think of that. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, so Kirk and Spock agree that what the Romulans are really after is they're after the Enterprise. So Kirk tells Tal that if they attempt to take the Enterprise, he will activate the self-destruct sequence, blow the ship up. And Tal tells Kirk that, you know, why don't you just think about it a little while? We'll give you 1 hour to consider it. So later in the conference room, Kirk questions Spock, asking why didn't he detect the ships earlier? And Spock speculates that they must have developed an improved cloaking device that their sensors can't penetrate. And Kirk, Spock also notes that if he hadn't taken them into the neutral zone on his own authorization, then they wouldn't be in this situation, and it wouldn't be an issue. Now, Kirk says they have three options. They can try to fight their way out, probably be destroyed, activate the self-destruct sequence and just blow the ship up, or they can surrender, which of course means they'll be taken prisoner and taken to Romulus, where who knows what will happen to them. And of course, also that means the Enterprise will be taken by the Romulans, and they'll have a Constitution class ship that they can pick apart. Now, McCoy is stunned when he discovers that Kirk ordered the Enterprise into the neutral zone on his own authority, and questions Kirk's actions in this matter. And Kirk doesn't like that, not one bit. And he tells McCoy that he is dismissed. Then Subcommander Tal contacts the Enterprise and tells Kirk that the commander of the Romulan ship would like to discuss the matter with Kirk and Spock in person. Kirk asks why he and Spock should give themselves up to the Romulans, and Tal says that the two Romulan officers will beam over to the Enterprise to serve as hostages while the negotiations take place, and Kirk agrees to the exchange. Now, before beaming over, Kirk tells Scotty that he's in command now, and if the Romulans attempt to take the ship, he should activate the self-destruct to prevent it from falling into Romulan hands. Then Kirk and Spock beam out, and two Romulans beam in, taking their place. And this is a spot where I think the reduced budget kind of tells, and this isn't really new because if you look back on the first season, there was always security around. It seemed like, when they would beam potentially hostile people in, you would often have some kind of security, a red shirt there in the transporter room. And certainly when they were beaming down, to a planet, there'd usually be a security attachment along, like maybe two or three guys. Um, in the second season, when they were beaming down to the planets, that largely went away. And another thing, of course, was also just more extras in the hallways, like in the first season. And then in the second season, really there's kind of a drop in the number of people that seem to be on the ship, you know. And here in the third season, we're seeing that again because they're beaming out and they know there's two Romulans beaming in, and yet there's no security. You know, they beam out and just leave Scotty here to deal with these two armed Romulans himself. You know, I mean, what if they just decided to shoot him and then storm the bridge or something? And again, I think it's just because they just didn't have the budget, to bring in extra people. And actually, when I get into the behind the scenes stuff, Roddenberry did complain about that actually. But I'm sure he was just told, look, we just, we don't have the money. All right. So, and this is another thing, because it's been a long time since I've watched this. And in my mind, I always assumed that, the Romulan commander, that this story takes place on board. Where's a good shot? On the Bird of Prey here, the Romulan ship. But no, it's actually, it takes place on one of the Klingon ships, which surprised me a little because that wasn't how I remembered it. Okay, now Kirk and Spock are taken to the Romulan commander, and to their surprise, the commander turns out to be a lady person. And she tells Spock to wait out in the hallway while she and Kirk negotiate. So she scolds Kirk for violating Romulan space and demands to know why the Enterprise has crossed over through the neutral zone. Kirk replies that the Enterprise had a sensor malfunction and they entered Romulan space on accident. The commander isn't buying this and she accuses Kirk of espionage, which Kirk denies. Then she calls Spock in, and as soon as she starts talking to him, it's clearly, it's pretty obvious she's interested in him. When Kirk asks why are you asking my first officer? I already told you what happened, and she notes that Vulcans and Romulans share a common ancestry, and Kirk wouldn't understand. In other words, none of your business. Then she asks Spock if it is true that Vulcans don't lie, and Spock promptly lies and said, "Yeah, it's true. We don't lie, except when we do." And she asks Spock what their mission is in Romulan space. Now, initially, Spock declines to answer. And then the commander's like, aha, okay, well, obviously there's something you don't want to tell me. And so again, she accuses them of crossing into the neutral zone in an attempt to capture or at least learn more about the Romulans' new cloaking device. And again, Kirk denies this accusation. She suggests that she will torture Kirk to get the answers she wants. And Kirk says that torture won't get her the answers she wants. And Spock tells the commander that Kirk has become increasingly erratic and the strain of command has affected his judgment and he is likely no longer fit for command. This infuriates Kirk and he angrily denies Spock's suggestion. Spock replies that Kirk has grown increasingly irrational as his behavior demonstrates and accuses Spock. Kirk accuses Spock of being a traitor. Then Spock tells the commander that Kirk violated the neutral zone on his own initiative and did so due to his hunger to attain personal glory. This sends Kirk into a rage and he threatens to kill Spock. And Shatner's really hamming it up in this one, as I've watched the show, I've kind of been cognizant of trying to like see when does Kirk really start leaning into the hamminess, and it really is evident here, and I think because I think there's only been one or two episodes before this that really kind of where Shatner's kind of overacting, you know, but he's definitely doing it with some of these scenes here. Okay, now later the Romulan commander and I'd give you her name, but they never give a name. She's just Romulan commander. Contacts the Enterprise and tells them that Kirk is guilty of espionage as well as the crew. She also lets them know that Spock's testimony was instrumental in her making this judgment. She says that since Kirk was acting on his own and not on Starfleet's orders, the lives of the crew will be spared. She orders Scotty to follow them back to Romulus, where the crew will leave the Enterprise and then be sent back to the Federation. But the Enterprise will be surrendered to them. Scotty tells security to put the two Romulans in the brig and then tells the commander that he takes orders from no one but Captain Kirk and that if they attempt to take the Enterprise by force, he will blow it up. And Kirk is pleased with this and tells Spock that he's a coward and says that unlike Vulcans, humans have integrity. The commander has Kirk sent to their brig, and she asks Spock how he can stand to be around humans all the time. And Spock notes that he is half human. But she says that Spock is a superior being in every measurable way, stronger and smarter, and asks why he doesn't have a command of his own at this point. And Spock replies that he doesn't really seek command, and she suggests that it's basically due to space racism. Then she suggests that if Spock were to defect, she would ensure that Spock gets those sorts of opportunities. And Spock admits that he has had thoughts along those lines in the past. But then he says that he also knows she just wants to get the Enterprise. And she admits that, saying it would make her career if she did, and saying that it could ensure his future as well if he were to help her get it. Meanwhile, Kirk gets thrown in a prison cell in the brig, and when he tries to leave, he gets shocked by a force field. Now, he's sufficiently injured that McCoy is told to beam over to provide medical care. He examines Kirk and says that Kirk will need further care that he can give on the Romulan ship. Another ruse. Yep. They're playing an angle here. And I mean, I'll talk about that later. After I kind of have gone through the episode. But like I say, I mean, so much of this, it's like if particularly the commander, she doesn't do just what they need at the time, then it's like, would this plan have worked? Okay. So, yeah, so McCoy says he's going to need to take Kirk back to the Enterprise for more care. Now, the commander is contacted, so she and Spock go to security. And now, as they're going to security, they pass by this corridor here where there's a door that's got very sinister lighting and a guard in front of it. And Spock starts to move in that direction, and the commander tells him to get away from there, saying that's a restricted area. Uh, only, Romulans with the proper clearance can get into that room. So they arrive at the brig, and McCoy says basically that Kirk is no longer fit for command. That he's mentally and emotionally kind of exhausted, and Kirk seems to be out of it. He's kind of like in a daze, and let's see. Okay, so then the Romulan commander says that, well, in that case, Spock is pretty much the commander now because he's the first officer. So she says he should take command of the Enterprise and cooperate with her proposal to take it to Romulus and avoid a battle that will surely end with the Enterprise being destroyed and the crew killed. He agrees to cooperate, and then Kirk becomes enraged, calling Spock a traitor, and then it charges at him. But Spock applies the Iron Claw, which he learned from Fritz von Erich himself. No, he applies the Vulcan, quote unquote, Vulcan death grip. And Kirk, cries out in pain and falls to the floor. And then McCoy announces, "You're dead, Jim." Now, later in the sick bay, because again, and this is one of the key things here, they let McCoy take Kirk's body back to the Enterprise. What if they hadn't done that? You know, what if they had decided to just shove him out an airlock or something? I don't know. Again, if they don't do just the right thing, then how does this plan work? It doesn't. So as much as I like the episode, it definitely has some issues. But anyway, he is taken back to the Enterprise, and in sickbay, he opens his eyes. He's alive, it turns out. And Chapel, who was looking at him, calls McCoy. And then McCoy reveals the truth, which is that the whole thing was a ruse, and this is all part of a plan. And that, of course, Kirk wasn't killed, that instead Spock used a nerve pinch that put Kirk into a kind of stasis that simulates death. It turns out that Kirk and Spock are operating under Starfleet orders, with Kirk playing the role of a madman in order to give Starfleet plausible deniability. And then he tells McCoy to prepare for surgery. Now, McCoy calls Scotty to sickbay, and Scotty arrives to find Kirk not only alive, but also disguised as a Romulan. Kirk tells Scotty that he's going to need a uniform from one of the Romulan prisoners. And this is another thing, what if one of the, because of course he conveniently gets a uniform that fits him. I mean, what if they had both been really tall Romulans? What? I mean, I guess they could have altered it, but that would have taken time. And I don't think they had a tailor on board the ship to do that for him. Anyway, meanwhile, on the Klingon ship, the commander has invited Spock to dinner, and so they're sharing some drinks and kind of flirting. And I did think this was interesting kind of continuity, because you'll notice their drinks are blue, and Romulan ale is usually shown as being blue. So I guess maybe that's what that's supposed to be. So I did think that was a nice bit of continuity, although later they have another drink and it's not blue. Okay, now back on the Enterprise, Kirk says that Spock was supposed to contact him with the coordinates of the cloaking device. And the idea would have been, I guess, that he would beam into wherever the cloaking device is so he could take it. But Spock has been unable to contact him. And again, the whole plan seems to hinge on whoever's in charge being fascinated with Spock and, having this prolonged discussion with him, keeping the commander distracted, but also so that Spock at some point will be on the ship and have a chance to find where the cloaking device is. Again, what if that aspect hadn't worked? But anyway, Kirk finally says they can't wait any longer, and he orders Scotty to beam him over. Meanwhile, the Romulan commander suggests that Spock could stay on Romulus after the Enterprise crew is sent back to Federation space if he wants, and goes further, suggesting they could be together as well if he wishes that, noting that Romulan women, unlike Vulcans, are not cold and logical, but very passionate. And they seem to be drinking Tranya now, is what that looks like. Or maybe just orange juice. Spock signals that he is agreeable to these overtures, and the commander says that she wants him to lead a small squad of Romulans back to the Enterprise and take command of it, and then take it to the nearest Romulan port where the crew will disembark. Spock agrees to do this, but he then more or less kind of broadly suggests that they enjoy a little sexy time first. She whispers her name to Spock, but we, the audience, don't hear it. And Spock says that her name is beautiful, but it seems odd for a soldier to have such a pretty name. and then she excuses herself to slip into something more comfortable. Now, with her out of the room, Spock contacts Kirk and tells him where the cloaking device is, but the Romulans detect the communicator signal. And Subcommander Tal tells them to locate its source. Now, then the commander returns, dressed in a kind of snug little dress, and then she and Spock start getting handsy with each other. And, they've established, in Journey to Babel that, Vulcans, they don't really touch a lot or display emotion, physical affection a lot. Sarek and his wife would just kind of touch fingers. And so they sort of expand upon this here where, instead of making out, they just sort of kind of run their fingers over each other's hands. And this would be echoed in Star Trek 3, actually, when, the young Spock is going into Ponfar and Savick has to kind of, I guess, I guess, well, have sex with him, for lack of a better term. I don't know how else to put it. Very passionate. Yeah. Well, I mean, more passionate than a Vulcan. I mean, I don't know how passionate that is. And yeah, I mean, it does make sense that Spock is like that, but you do question if the Romulans aren't cold and logical, then wouldn't they be demonstrating physical affection in a way more like a human would? Okay, where was I? Okay, so now Kirk finds the cloaking device chamber, and and it is kind of cheesy how he gets by these guards, because he basically just comes up and tries to enter, and then the guard's like, who are you? And pulls a gun, and then he's like, there's a Federation spy on board. Make sure no one gets in, and the guy demands to know, Kirk's name or something, and then Kirk's literally like, "Oh, look over there," and the guard looks, and then he, of course, like, oh, excuse me, hiccup there. He karate chops him. Okay, now we then go back to Spock and the Romulan commander, and Sub Commander Tal arrives and tells her about the transmission. She tells them to locate the source, and he says, "We did. We found it. It's coming from your room." Then Spock reveals his communicator and makes no attempt to deny he did it. It makes you wonder why they didn't search him and take his communicator when he came on board, but whatever. And then the commander realizes that they must be after the cloaking device. Now, Kirk gains entry to the cloaking device chamber. Um, and then he is confronted by another guard. And again, the guard, Kirk overpowers the guard, kicks him, knocks him out. Then Kirk removes the cloaking device, which you would think would set off some kind of alarm, right? I mean, this is only the most important piece of technology in their ship, and you would think if the thing's malfunctioning, there would probably be some kind of alarm to tell them. And now he's literally unplugging the thing from the ship. You would think that there would be some kind of alarm telling them something's wrong. So he removes the cloaking device, and I don't know. Do I have a good picture of it? Yeah, I think I do. I think we do when Scotty's putting it in. I'll get to that in a minute. So he beams back to the Enterprise, and on the Enterprise, Kirk arrives and orders Scotty to connect the cloaking device into the defensive screen. And Scotty says he isn't sure he can do it, but Kirk tells him he's got 15 minutes to get it done. Now Spock and the Romulans arrive to find the cloaking device gone. And the commander is dismayed to realize that Spock has been playing her. And he asks her what method of execution she would prefer for him. And then she slaps him one, and Spock's just like, hey, Don't hate the player, hate the game, baby. And then she tells Tal to assemble a landing party, and that if the Enterprise doesn't surrender, they will have to destroy it. And she tells Spock that he will be tried for sabotage and executed. And he asks if he will be allowed to submit a statement in the trial, and she says he will. Now, back on the Enterprise. Oh, yeah, okay. So here's Scotty putting the cloaking device into the ship, and I'm pretty sure this part right here, I'm pretty sure this is part of Nomad from the Changeling, or I'm pretty sure that's what that is. It looks very similar. Or if it's not the same, then it's maybe made from the same mold or same kind of parts or something. Okay, so Kirk arrives on the bridge, and of course they're amazed to find Kirk alive, because everyone thought he was dead, and also that he's done up as a Romulan. Now he tells Chekhov to scan the Klingon ship for Spock, and Chekhov tells Kirk that he's located Spock on the Romulan ship, and then Scotty tells Kirk that the cloaking device is ready. Now, meanwhile, Spock has asked if he can, because he's going to be put on trial, and he asks if he can give some sort of official statement in his defense. And she says, you can. And this device here is like got some kind of recorder. So she activates it, and he begins by basically admitting his guilt, that he is guilty of sabotage and all this. But then he starts to beam out, and the Romulan commander, again, this is a bizarre thing to do. She then runs and grabs hold of Spock, and so she beams over to the Enterprise with him. Now, Scotty announces that the cloaking device is ready. So then Kirk orders the Enterprise to go to Warp 9, and they fly out of there, and the Romulans pursue them. Kirk wants the cloaking device activated, but Scotty says that it's stopped working. He's having problems with it. Then Spock and the commander arrive on the bridge, and Kirk contacts the Romulans and tells them that he has their commander, but she tells Tal to attack the Enterprise and destroy it. So the Romulans move to attack. Kirk asks Scotty if the cloaking device is working, and he says that he isn't sure and it might cause an overload. But Kirk says they have no choice, so he tells them to activate it. Scotty does, and the cloaking device works, causing the Enterprise to disappear. Now the Romulans see it vanishing, and Tal orders a volley of. Well, initially they fire torpedoes, but he's firing the disruptors here. But Kirk, before they fire, Kirk orders an abrupt course change, and so the Klingon, or the Romulan ship, goes off in the wrong direction, chasing after the Enterprise on their old heading. And the commander realizes that they've won, and that they're going to get away with it, because she has admitted that even the Romulans aren't even their sensors can't penetrate the cloak. So if a ship cloaks, even they can't detect it. They don't even know how to yet. Now Kirk tells Spock to take the commander to not to the brig, but tells her she'll be held in quarters, under guard, I'm sure, and they'll take her to a star base, and basically Starfleet will figure out what to do with you. And as they get into the turbo lift, Spock and the commander, she tells Spock that we'll figure out how to penetrate the cloak eventually, and then this won't do you any good. And Spock admits that that's probably true, saying that I believe he says that military secrets are the most fleeting of secrets. And he tells the commander that while he originally was only interested in the cloaking device, his interest in her was genuine. She says that it was still his choice to do what he did, and he agrees that it was, but also asks if, as he says, if I had done any less, would you still respect me? If I hadn't done my duty. Spock then returns to the bridge where McCoy tells Kirk to report to sickbay to have his Romulan ears removed, and Spock urges Kirk to do so, noting that somehow the pointed ears aren't as aesthetically pleasing on him. And it ends there. And Joan Linville playing the Romulan commander, Jack Donner playing Sub Commander Tau. Okay. Yeah. There we go. And yeah, as far as a grade, so I went back and forth on this one because initially, like again, I really like this episode. So initially, I think I was giving it an A. But after watching it, and kind of going over it thoroughly again, and looking at honestly all the kind of contrivances and plot holes, it's kind of like, And I think I knocked it down to a B plus at one point, but I'll give it an A minus. I like this episode despite any of its shortcomings. And it's an episode with Romulans, and there's only a couple of those, so I can't not give it a good rating. And it's again it's also an important lore episode because we do get this Romulan Klingon alliance that will certainly have big ramifications for Star Trek later down the line. Okay, so as mentioned, this was originally written by DC Fontana. It was originally her story. Writer DC Fontana said, quote, it was essentially based on the Pueblo incident, which had happened not that long before. So if you don't know about that, and I didn't know about it myself before reading about it. So the USS Pueblo, which was a communications monitoring ship, was attacked by North Korean naval vessels off the waters of North Korea on January 23rd, 1968. So right at the beginning of the year. The Koreans claimed the U.S. spy ship was in their territorial waters. The American government denied that, claiming they were in international waters the whole time. I don't know. uh, I wasn't born yet. In fact, this was a little over 5 months before I was born. So, and I've never really read up on this, so I don't really know which side was being truthful here. One crewman was killed in the attack and several injured. When the Koreans boarded the ship, the captain and his crew were caught in the act of destroying electronic equipment and top secret documents. The 82 Pueblo survivors were then held prisoner in North Korea, where they were relentlessly interrogated and tortured for 11 long months until the end of 1968. It was big news and a very hot topic for Fontana's story. Quote, I thought that would be interesting, she said. What if the Enterprise is trespassing where it shouldn't be on a secret mission and they get caught? What happens next? That was the basis for the whole story. The idea of Kirk running around with ears was a funny one that occurred. And I said, what would happen if, uh, you know, it, it is always a what if situation or question that you ask yourself to start a story. What if? And it wasn't just Kirk who was running around with ears in the original story. In the first story outline, McCoy is done up as a Romulan as well. And this is where the humor for the episode would kick in with McCoy, who in the past had unleashed numerous comments about Spock's pointed ears, was now sporting pointy ears of his own. Let me take a drink of water right quick here. Okay. Appropriately, the title of Fontana's What If story, originally it was titled Ears. And she submitted the story on March 29th, 1968. Besides the obvious, the title also made reference to listening in the intent of a ship such as the USS Pueblo and here the Enterprise. The story at this time was basically the same but structured differently. The Enterprise is on an observation mission along the edge of the neutral zone, and there's a VIP passenger on board, in this case, Spock's father, Sarek. Suddenly, several Romulan ships appear, having gotten close enough to surround the Enterprise using a new and improved cloaking device. They fire on the Enterprise, and Kirk agrees to surrender. The Enterprise is taken across the neutral zone to Romulan space and to a Romulan starbase. The commander they meet is a man, a male Romulan, and he orders that Kirk and Spock be interrogated. Before this can happen, they both take what appear to be suicide pills. McCoy is called to the base and pronounces them dead. He is allowed to return to the Enterprise with the bodies, where we learn that the pills were made of the same drug that McCoy used to make it appear that Kirk had died during his battle with Spock in a mock time. Which I forget. They never gave a name for it. They called it what did Kirk call it? Like a cataleptic neutralizer or paralyzer or something like that. We now discover that Kirk and Spock are on a secret mission sent to the neutral zone as bait to discover if there is any truth behind rumors that the Romulans have a new cloaking device. Now, McCoy and Kirk are given makeovers with Romulan style eyebrows and ears as well as uniforms. Meanwhile, Sarek is with the Romulan commander meeting to negotiate on behalf of the Federation, but this is really just a distraction and stalling tactic so that Kirk and McCoy can return to steal the cloaking device. Fontana later admitted that she was merely putting frosting on the case and said, quote, Sarek didn't need to be in the story. He only would have been an added bonus for the fans. Yeah, I'm sure the fans would have liked to see him again, but again, with the budgets the way they were here in the third season, I think the chance of bringing another guest star in for one of these was just it wasn't going to happen. Ears was one of the four assignments that Roddenberry had given Fontana in March. The others, Joanna, Survival, and Van Vogt's robots, were not tied to a breaking news event. Therefore, they were seen as less time sensitive. And so this episode was given priority. Now, NBC had no problem with Star Trek exploiting a real life news story for a higher Nielsen share as long as the approach was pro American. And so the network representatives agreed the script needed to be developed quickly. All haste was recommended as the Pueblo crisis was already into its third month at this point. Fontana made the necessary changes in the script and sent in her revision, which was dated April 19th. Sarek was now out, and Spock is the one who's negotiating with the Romulan commander, who at this point was still a man, looking to buy time and distract the enemy long enough to allow Kirk to complete the covert mission. It was now clear from the get go that Kirk is up to something in letting the Enterprise into the neutral zone. Many aspects of the story structure were, in fact, now very much like the episode that got produced. And with network permission to parallel the Pueblo incident, as the news services were now calling it, the title of Fontana's story was changed to the more obvious The Enterprise incident. 3 days later, on April 22nd, at the request of Fred Freiberger, Fontana created a second revised outline establishing that the Romulans now use Klingon made ships. And you got to remember, again, this is back in the 60s, so typewriters. So she probably had to, largely retype a lot of that script just to put into, two or three lines. Now, I'm not going to go through it because, again, there's like memos back and forth and changes are made to the script, and I won't go through them all. But Fred Freiberger had the idea of making the Romulan commander a woman, and then kind of having a sort of romance between Spock and this female commander. Where is it here? Yeah, I don't see the exact line where he talks about it, but basically, it was Fred Freiberger's idea. He liked the idea of a heated up relationship between Spock and the commander. He had Arthur Singer, that's the story editor, intercept the script on its way to the Mimeo department and adding in a brief romantic interlude. And again, he did this without telling Fontana, who had already, I think, kind of brushed off that idea. This scene, which was put into the yellow cover first draft, which was done on June 7th, had Spock take the commander in his arms for the purpose of, quote, raining kisses on every square inch above her shoulder. He tells her that her name is beautiful, prompting her to stretch out on her divan, striking an inviting pose as she asks, do you really like it? Spock takes her into his arms and says, I adore you. And then and then Singer cut to a Fontana written scene as the spy story proceeds. Yeah, yeah, not very Spock like. You know, if it was Spock, he would have said something like, smashing now would be most logical. Okay, so John Meredith Lucas was hired to direct, and he began the pre production phase on June 11th. He had some suggestions concerning the material, which he discussed with Freiberger and Singer. And then Freiberger had his turn with the script, embellishing on the sexiness Singer had previously inserted, creating the final draft. Fontana received her copy on June 13th, and she promptly fired off a letter to her employers, writing, quote, gentlemen, these are not the outcries of a wounded writer, but of an ex-story editor with 4 years of service on Star Trek. We have established Vulcans do not nuzzle or kiss or hug or display any other form of human affection. The Vulcan outward sign of affection is expressed in a certain touching of hands, as demonstrated in Journey to Babel. If Spock behaves in such outlandishly embarrassing human manner as is indicated in this scene, he violates the character we have established for him and the culture he comes from. And the commander had jolly well be suspicious if Spock starts slobbering all over her. Their seduction scene should be cool, suggesting an alien sexuality, not human passion. Frankly, our fans, especially the vocal ones who write a lot of letters, are very hip to what is and what isn't Vulcan. They write whole treatises and fanzines for a large circle of subscribers based on Vulcan psychology, physiology, emotions, mores, and even what Spock eats for breakfast. And they will tune us out if the business in the seduction scene isn't changed. I object strongly to the removal of the brief scene in which Nurse Chapel and McCoy speak to Spock. The Nurse Chapel is a character with key relationships to McCoy and to Spock. Female viewers tend to identify with her caring for Spock. And as head nurse, she is both a professional associate of McCoy as well as someone for him to talk to. I feel the original scene, as I wrote it in my second draft, said something for these characters. In what is now left of the scene in subsequent scenes, 77 and 78, the character of Nurse Chapel is reduced to an unemotional automaton. Fontana also had a problem with the opening of the show, complaining, quote, I feel the teaser lays on Kirk's irritability much too thickly. I miss a specific statement from Kirk that he was to carry out a spy mission on Federation orders and that he was on that mission because Klingon vessels had been seen entering the neutral zone. So they kind of, in the earlier drafts, they kind of laid out more explicitly why the Enterprise is there, which kind of got cut out. This last point, like the previous ones, was a serious and legitimate concern. It helped establish that there was now an alliance between the Federation's two biggest enemies, and an explanation as to why the Romulans were now using Klingon ships. At one point in the omitted scene, Spock tells the Romulan commander that her people are making a mistake in dealing with the Klingons, who, quote, are known to have little honor, unquote. On the same day that Fontana wrote to Freiberger, she went over the producer's head, and she sent a letter directly to Roddenberry, complaining to him, saying, "These are not the wailings of a writer yelling about their work being changed. This is the idea of Spock and Christine. This, in the idea areas of Spock and Christine, is a protest against stupid writing and the violation of established characters, which will be charged on me. Spock, in particular, is going to be hurt if the scene I discussed here isn't changed." Christine has been given short shrift too many times. This is one more instance where I've tried to give her something to play, half a page, and it has been torpedoed. I know you're trying to keep your fingers out of the pie, but can you allow even Spock to get this far out of hand, as conceived by this new staff? Forgive me if I ask too much of you. Just wanted you to know that this is happening and I have protested. I'm not a new writer to the show and have more Star Trek credits than any other writer, and I worked with you on the Star Trek since April of 1964. I think I understand it pretty well, and I hate to see your creation blasted because the fans will laugh. And Leonard Nimoy was lobbying for changes as well. He too wrote a lengthy letter to Roddenberry complaining about Spock's oversexed behavior. Fortunately, the new regime backed down. The script was changed and the sex was cooled slightly, but not enough to appease Fontana or the fans she spoke of who wrote for the Star Trek fanzines. 40 years later, she said, quote, "What I didn't like was the more or less sexual tension that was put in between the Romulan commander and Spock, because I thought, ugh, I wouldn't believe any of this. If I was the commander of that Romulan ship and a Vulcan approached me, I wouldn't trust him for a minute. So I felt that that was not valid, that it was unbelievable. It was put in after I had done my work. Overall, it wasn't a bad episode. It's one that a lot of people like. I just felt there were certain aspects of it that didn't work as well." And I agree with her. Like I say, so much of this episode seems to hinge on, this female Romulan being fascinated with Spock and kind of basically wanting to jump his bones, for lack of a better term. Uh, Not bones, but you know what I mean. Never mind. Let's see. Okay, more than 2 decades after the fact, Fred Freiberger opened a can of worms when he told Starlog magazine, quote, "The story dramatically, I felt, did not work. There were some very good elements in it. Dorothy probably had a better grasp of Spock's character than I did, but one of the things I really wanted to do with Spock's character was explore the areas Gene had built into the character about having a Vulcan father and an Earth mother, which I didn't see too much of. He was just playing that cool guy all the time from what I saw. I wanted to use the other aspects of the character, which were not germane to Fontana's script." And Rogue says, once again, the Hollywood believes the audience is dumb. Yeah. Um, I mean, I don't think it was so much a matter that, again, I think that it was a matter of you had Freiberger, who was new to the show, and the story editor, Arthur Singer, who were also new to the show and new to Trek. And I think they just didn't know these characters that well. I think it was more a matter of that. Um, I mean, I'm not saying they don't think the audience is dumb. Hollywood shows that all the time, but I don't think that was what motivated this. I don't think they were like, let's put this sex scene in here with Spock because, the fans are dumb and they'll buy it. At least that isn't the impression I get. More damaging than what was added in is what was taken out. Fontana had included a couple of sections of dialogue where Kirk and his people expressed concern over the Romulans' new alliance with the Klingons. Also in her script, explanations as to how Kirk could be beamed onto the Romulan ship, then off, and Spock can be beamed off during a tense battle situation. Yeah, and that's another thing. I mean, shouldn't their shields be up? You know, but even if they're not up, wouldn't they have people on sensors all the time? Like every second. making sure the other ship isn't powering up their weapons, or something like that. If that's the case, why didn't they detect the beam out? You know. Now, in Fontana's version, Spock is not only instated as the new captain of the Enterprise after Kirk's alleged death, but he returns to the Enterprise and orders Scotty to stand down and cancel the call to battle stations. With the weapons temporarily deactivated, there's no reason for the Romulan ship to expend power and keep the shields up. But that was taken out, so that justification isn't there. The enemy commander is even preparing to send Romulans to the captured Enterprise for the trip back to our Empire's home planet. And the lowering of the shields allows Kirk and McCoy to beam back to the Romulan flagship, and Spock later to be beamed off. Freiberger and Singer were the ones who had dropped these important elements from the script, creating plot holes. Yeah, so you see, another change made was to appease Robert Justman. DeForest Kelly lost his chance to wear pointed ears. Nothing of significance other than a bit of funny business. However, significant amounts of money and time were saved. Freiberger's primary contribution to the script was rewriting the seduction scene between Spock and the Romulan commander, losing the raining of kisses that Singer had added and replacing it with sensuous touching of fingertips, an act far more appropriate for a Vulcan and another who shares his ancestry. Okay, John Meredith Lucas had his third directing assignment for the series, following The Ultimate Commuter and Elan of Troyes. All three had been shipboard bottle shows, and Lucas was proving to be among the best at this type of restrictive production. So Joanne Linville, who we see here, was hired to play the Romulan commander. She was 40, and she was the wife of Mark Rydell, who was a TV director. And at the time, he was working on the show I Spy. One of her first jobs in TV, and actually, if you remember, like back in Elan of Troyes, the actress who played Elan of Troyes, France Wynn, she was married to Robert Culp, who starred on I Spy. So a lot of connections there. One of her first jobs in TV in the 1950s was for the Kaiser Aluminum Hour and the title character in Gwendolyn, an episode which co starred William Shatner. She and Shatner appeared together again in 1958 on the United States Steel Hour and in 1961 on an episode of The Defenders. Linville worked with Leonard Nimoy in a 1962 episode of the drama Sam Benedict. Other sci-fi and genre appearances include the lead in The Passerby, a 1961 Twilight Zone episode, in which Linville plays the widow of a Confederate soldier during the American Civil War who is mysteriously reunited with her dead husband, and 2 episodes of the series One Step Beyond, and 2 more episodes of The Invaders. She was a top female guest star in episodes of Gunsmoke, Route 66, The Fugitive, I Spy, Hawaiian Five-0, and The Streets of San Francisco, among others. Now, Linville, as it turns out, was not the first choice to play the Romulan commander. Linville said, quote, "It was actually offered to Lee Grant first. Lee Grant was a hot name in Hollywood at the time. She'd done important films and was well known, I'm sure. She's always been sorry that she didn't take it." Oh, hey, Gwagnar. Hello, sir. Thanks for showing up. Always good to see you. Uh, hey, Gwagnar. Are you guys still doing the movie things on the weekend? I'm not on Twitter as much these days, so I haven't seen if you guys are still posting stuff about that. And Rogue says, "Aren't Romulans Vulcans that do not restrain their emotions?" Yeah, that's basically what they are. Now there has been like thousands of years of separation, so you can argue there have maybe been some other like minor changes that have taken place, but basically yes. One big difference is that the Romulans don't seem to have the tremendous strength that Vulcans have. Vulcans are like insanely strong, and yet as we see in this episode, Romulans don't seem to be much stronger than humans. Kirk can bonk him on the head and take him out easily. Ah, okay. So you say, yeah, we do a movie we watched last Sunday in the month. Okay. Okay. I'll try to remember that because I keep thinking to maybe check Twitter and see if you posted anything, but I'm just not on there much now. And Rogue says they must have devolved. Yeah, in a sense, I guess. My guess would be that Romulus isn't as big a planet. It doesn't have it has lighter gravity than Vulcan does, and because they've been in that lighter gravity for thousands of years, their musculature is kind of diminished so that they're not as strong as they used to be. Let me take another drink of water here. Okay. So when Lee Grant declined the role, Fred Freiberger thought of Linville. She remembers, quote, in those days in television, when you already had a lot of roles to your under your belt, there was no going in and reading for a part. I was called and told by my agent, Joanne, you are, and I'm assuming it's Joanne, not Joan, because I don't think Joan would have the E at the end. So I'm saying Joanne. Joanne, you are to be in California on this date. I'll have somebody meet you at the airport and I'll go with you to the studio. It was a different world back then. When Linville first visited the Star Trek offices, she was shown the costume Bill Theiss had prepared for her. She recalled, quote, excuse me, the fabric was priceless, beautiful, and it was wrapped around a dressing model. The designer had arranged the material of the costume to make the woman wearing it appear really busty. And I said, this is not for me. Then I took the fabric off the model, and because it was one piece, I pulled it over my shoulder and down around my legs and up around the waist and tied it off and said, it should be this. And they made it just like that. Bill Theiss, the wardrobe coordinator, agreed to do it that way because he knew that I knew the character more than he did. He was going to have her be very sexy. Well, no, what he got from me was a soldier. A soldier is, you know, uh, a full chest, direct, honest, 2 feet on the ground, the truth coming up from her feet and through her body. And when she sits in that chair, she owns the chair and it comes across. So that is the way I approached it. So, we we missed out on our chance for an episode of Busty Romulan Commanders. Wagner says, I like the look of the Romulans better in TOS than what they look like in the TNG and others. You mean with the forehead, I guess? Yeah. With their uniforms, I kind of go back and forth on it. Kind of on one hand, I kind of like the color contrast, with the magenta and the other part of it, but it looks like sofa upholstery or something. And Rogue says, I like their look in Star Trek Enterprise, an underrated show. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, because they showed all the Romulans with that kind of forehead. If they had some Romulans with it and some without it, it would work better for me. Because, like in the episode Unification, where Spock is on Romulus, the whole idea seems to be, of course, that since Romulans and Vulcans are, basically distant cousins, he can blend in and go unnoticed, and there are even shots of him like in the streets walking around and no one seems to have an issue. But it's like, well, don't they notice he doesn't have the forehead? So why don't they say anything? Okay, so now Jack Donner was cast as Sub Commander Tau. Let's see, there he is. He was 39 years old and he had been on television since 1962. Donner says, quote, I had done perhaps 100 movies and TV shows prior to that and a number of stage plays. Casting director Joe DeGosta had cast me in several things prior to that, so when that came up, he called me in and I read and got the part, and the rest is history, as they say. And then Richard Compton was the Romulan technical officer. Now, I don't think I got a good shot of him. Let me, because he's the guy in the control room. Or let me go back here. Yeah, yeah, there he is. So I don't have a good shot of his face, but this is the guy I'm talking about. Um, his name was Richard Compton, and I know it's him because he's the only other person on the ship that didn't wear a helmet, and therefore had to have pointed ears for the episode. He was 30 and had previously appeared in the Doomsday Machine episode, actually, playing a human. Regarding her preparation for the role, let's go back here. There we go. So regarding her preparation for the role, Linville said, quote, where do I start? I had 48 hours from the time I had the costume fitting and was handed the script before we started filming. So I started physically. I'm not going to have time to get into the past of how she grew up and how she became this. No, no, no. I have to have the present and the future in me. And I have to have it in my body and in my eyes. The eyes are everything. Where do your eyes focus? How do they see? How are you fed as this character? So that character came to life physically for me first. How did she stand on her feet? How does she talk to you? How does she move? She's direct. She's forthright. And her eyes meet yours when she talks to you. This character is totally in the present and the truth, interested in what's happening right now. Who are you, Mr. Spock? Why are you here? What are you really after? Okay. So day three. Now, day three was the only day that Jack Donner was on set. Let me go back. There he is. Oh yeah, I guess that's Washburn right there, right? I guess that's him. Let's see. So he said, quote, it took about an hour to go through the makeup and get the ears on. My eyebrows are naturally thin, so they didn't have to shave me to make them slant upward. The show was new to me, but as an actor, you get involved in the character and it is no longer strange. It becomes familiar to you. I thought it was well written. It made sense. So once I was in costume and on set, it all felt very familiar and not strange at all. It was very pleasant working with Shatner and Nimoy. I knew Leonard. We had done a couple of plays before. We had both broken into television. Leonard was a good actor, a genuine actor, and I suppose I was as well. I found it hard to get a smile or laugh from him. I guess that was attributed to his concentration on his role and the plot. He was a very serious actor, but a pleasant guy. Let's see. Now, Joanne Linville said, of course, Shatner and I had worked together before. Let me bring up a shot of that. That's good enough. Shatner and I had worked together before. I did his first show when he came down from Canada and a couple of others. So we were already familiar in that way, and I could see what he was doing with his character for those scenes. He was playing being a bad boy, in a sense, saying, let's just have fun and give the audience a little tease. But I didn't play anything for fun. And so what I get, the impression I'm getting here is that basically he wanted the two of them to have kind of a flirtatious exchange as well. You know, he wanted to be kind of turning on the Kirk charm, and she just wasn't going for it. And he basically complained, saying, basically, you're playing it too much like Leonard. And she said, yeah, well, basically, yeah, it's my performance, not yours. I can do that if I want. Let's see. Linville credited Nimoy for the chemistry that they shared and his devotion to both the character and the scene. And there was someone else she gave credit to, saying that uh, she was also very fond of the lighting guy. That would be Jerry Finnerman, the cinematographer. He took hours with me. He lit me like he would have lit Greta Garbo. He was a true artist. And I did notice that the lighting in this is, quite good. I mean, there's a, a lot of magenta lighting in this and scenery. It seemed like between the uh, between the Romulan uniforms and then the lighting on the walls and everything. As for director John Meredith Lucas, Linville said, quote, the director is rarely of any help to the actor when in television. He does the rest of all the work, but seldom does he feed you. He would have to be a person who was an actor first and then became a director, and then he might know what to tell you. But otherwise, you've got to have your own ideas when you walk in. You've got to see what you see and what you feel. My job was to care about Leonard and to care about what was happening with my character and between the two of us in the scenes, and the challenge of it was to do the touching scene. As for the betrayal and the slap of Spock's face, bring that up. There we go. Rogue says it sets the mood. Yeah, I guess in a way it does. It's mainly just that the whole thing with Star Trek, and it was a similar thing with Batman, was that color television was new. Color television was the new technology. And so, that's why the Enterprise crew have all these different colored uniforms. And, they were basically now able to do stuff on TV that had never been done before as far as lighting and using color. And so that was a big part of why they did that. And of course, it did give the show a very memorable look. Linville said, it thrilled me that this strong military woman would lose her discipline for that one moment and slap him. And I really slapped him. I didn't tell him it was going to be anything other than a stage slap. I just did it. It was real. And he took the slap right. Now, regarding the feud between DC Fontana and Fred Freiberger regarding the script, John Meredith Lucas said, quote, if there were any problems, I wasn't aware of them because I wasn't producing the show then. Dorothy had never expressed any dissatisfaction to me, but I didn't have the same relationship with her that I had before. I thought it was a fun episode to work on. Leonard Nimoy, clearly unshaken by the Romulan Vulcan romantic interlude, shared, saying, quote, episodes like the Enterprise incident made it exciting to go to work. Now, once the optical effects had been added, let me see if I can find a good shot of all the ships here. Yeah, there we go. That's good enough. Once all the optical effects had been added, Roddenberry dropped by Paramount for a screening of the episode without the music and sound effects. On July 22nd, 1968, he wrote to Freiberger, quote, I believe the Enterprise incident to be an excellent show. But in this episode, as in some others we have shot earlier, I think we need more extras. So yeah, so he was taking note of that too, that the ship's kind of empty now. But again, that was a budgetary thing, and there was really not much they could do about it. Okay, now another thing is notable about this episode. As you probably know, Alexander Courage was the guy who wrote the main theme for the show. that plays during the opening credits. Now, he did a couple of music for some of the early episodes, but he left after only a couple of episodes because, I'm not going to get into it all because I've covered it elsewhere. But basically, Roddenberry pulled a fast one and wound up sharing writing credits on the music, which, arguably he didn't really deserve. And so now Courage was going to have to share all the royalties from the music with him, which he did not like. He didn't appreciate that at all, and I don't blame him. I mean, Shatner basically, or not Shatner, but Roddenberry kind of screwed him, really. But Alexander Courage returned for this episode. After an absence of 2 years and still harboring a grudge against Roddenberry over their past royalty disputes. Besides composing the series theme and scoring the two pilot films, Courage had contributed the music for the episodes Man Trap and The Naked Time. His work here is less successful. The score is stirring in places, romantic in others, but for the most part it is often repetitive, particularly the menace music with its melodramatic four-note motif, which is heard every time we see a Romulan ship. I like that music, though. I mean, I think it, I think it works. Now, even though this was a bottle show and filmed in just 6 days, the Enterprise incident came in $1,277 over budget. If a show such as this couldn't stay under Paramount's miserly per episode allocation of $178,362 per episode, then what episode could? With only 4 episodes now in the can, the series was $22,485 over budget, which in 2014 dollars would have equated to about $150,000. Now, notably, newspapers around America and in Canada largely ignored the whole high concept love story between a Romulan female and Mr. Spock in favor of focusing on the much more promotable and timely angle of Kirk being dressed up as a Romulan. Joanne Linville was watching the night the Enterprise incident first aired, and she said, "That may have been the only time I saw it in its entirety, and I liked it a lot. A lot. I liked how it ended with her walking strongly and with dignity into that elevator. I think she's still out there somewhere. She would have found a way to have recovered. I think the show's turned out wonderfully." And, actually, if any of you have ever watched Star Trek Continues, uh, they kind of, let me, the scenes at the end where she's on the bridge, this scene actually was recreated in an episode of Star Trek Continues, the fan series. And in that episode, the actress playing the Romulan commander is actually Joanne Linville's daughter. It's her own daughter playing her, really. And she's almost like looks just like her mother. I mean, I remember when I was first watching that episode, and I saw her, and I was like, "Wait a minute, that can't be the same actress." That was like 40 years ago. She must be older. So I checked the credits, and sure enough, it was her daughter. Okay, now this episode aired on September 27th, 1968, and it did okay in the ratings. Star Trek on that night got a 26% audience share, which was good enough for second place, although it was way behind the CBS Thursday Night Movie, which got a 41% share. But it was behind Judd for the Defense, which had a 15. Taking into account the writing, acting, and his visuals achieved through lighting and camera work, Jerry Finnerman picked this as one of his favorite episodes of Star Trek, on par with Spectre of the Gun and besting the other three in his top 5 list, which were Space Seed, City on the Edge of Forever, and Amok Time. He said, quote, "That was a good show, and Joanne Linville, she's a nice lady. She did a great job. And Leonard did a great job, too." Entertainment Weekly, in a special Star Trek episode, or issue rather, Star Trek issue, picked this episode as the ninth best from the original series, referring to it as a slick Mission Impossible send up. And Rogues says, now I'm interested in that Star Trek Continues episode. Yeah, if you haven't read Star Trek Continues, Rogues, I highly recommend it. It's probably the best fan series for Star Trek that's been done so far. Because they really go to great pains to kind of copy the look of the original series. You know, even like the aspect ratio of the cameras they're using and stuff like that. And some of the episodes are genuinely really good. I believe there's 11 episodes. And, you know, the first couple episodes for me, honestly, are kind of rocky. They're not great. But the show, from when it begins over the course of 11 episodes, it improves so much so quickly. It's just fascinating to look at it and see how the improvements came. And the final three or so episodes of Star Trek Continues, I mean, I'll put them up against just about anything Star Trek, you know, from the original series or Next Generation or anything. They're that good, just really really good. In fact, I toyed with doing something like this, you know, format I'm doing here with Star Trek Continues at one point. But I'm not sure I'm really going to do that anymore. We'll see, but probably not. Although I did do a video on it. Actually, I did do a video about Star Trek Continues some time ago, just kind of talking about the series as a whole. So if you go to my channel and search for that, you know, you should be able to bring that up. Oh, and also please do like the stream if you haven't already. I always forget to do that. uh, let's see. Okay, received. So this is a letter that was received after the Enterprise incident aired. Quote: why did the Romulans stop using the boomerang-shaped ships and start using Klingon models? Signed, CJF. So the information had been edited out of DC Fontana's script and therefore had to be provided to the fans after the fact in the official Star Trek newsletter. The staff's response was, quote, the Romulans and Klingons formed a limited alliance to meet the threat of the Federation. Their treaty included help from the Klingons for the Romulans to change over to faster, more powerful ships used by the Klingons. Also, the production staff of Star Trek felt that the Klingon model was visually more interesting. And they wanted to use that model because there was a Klingon model toy, you know, being sold by the same company that made the Enterprise model and the shuttlecraft model. And they felt that putting the Klingon ships in the episode would help boost sales. And, you know, it's interesting to think about how, you know, they had the Romulans in this episode use Klingon ships. And because of that, they had to establish, you know, an alliance between the Romulans and the Klingons. But then in Star Trek 3, that same alliance is used to explain how the Klingons are using a ship with a cloaking device, which originally it was supposed to be Romulans. You know, that was supposed to be the bird of prey in the Star Trek 3 was originally supposed to be a Romulan bird of prey that the Klingons steal. But they didn't have the time or the budget to do that stuff, so they just skipped all that. And Rogue says, taking a look now, I may have seen an episode or two and forgotten. Okay. Well, thank you. Okay. Leonard Nimoy said, quote, like all of Dorothy's scripts, the Enterprise incident had an edge to it, an adult level of complication and social commentary. The characters' lives were being affected, their ethics violated, even their spirituality touched. Scripts like these added to the moral structure of the Star Trek universe. And Joanne Linville said, I had no idea this was going to become what it was, and neither did Roddenberry, or he wouldn't have given some of it away. They walked off that set not knowing that that chair that they were walking by was going to be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I walked away from that wonderful costume. The thing that I did take away from the show was a part of that character. The way I stand and carry myself to this day, that came from her. She has carried on into my life and into my future performances. Okay, so that'll do it for the Enterprise incident. All right. So, and again, if you haven't liked the stream yet, please do. And if you haven't, please do sub to the channel. Before we wrap up here, so I should be back next week to do another episode next Tuesday. And that episode is going to be, what is it? Which episode? Oh, yeah. That episode will be And the Children Shall Lead, which been a long time since I've seen that one, but as I recall, that is not a very good episode. So the first, and really kind of the first real not good episode of the season, I think, which is this is the fourth one. So, I mean, this season actually got off to a pretty good start with Spectre of the Gun and then Elan of Troyes. And then this side of Paradise. I mean, it's a little cheesy, but not because of not because of budget or anything like that. It was just kind of there were just things in it that didn't age well, unfortunately. But it's not a bad episode in and of itself. So yeah, probably the first stinker episode I'm going to cover for this season. That'll be next week. Between now and then, of course, I'll probably stream Monday for Earth's Mightiest Mondays with my friends J-Man and Decepticon, taking a look at the original Avengers series. And I guess that will be it. So again, thanks to everyone who tuned in to the stream and those who catch it on a rewatch. And everyone have a good evening, and I will see you all next week. Thanks for watching.